The Candidates has begun. In this first video, I'd like to take a look at the game between Javokhir Sindarov and Andrey Esipenko. Before we get into that, let's just have a look at the round one pairings. So we've got Matthias Bluebaum against Wei Yi, Pragnananda against Giri, Caruana against Nakamura, and this game, Sindarov against Esipenko. So, two young players, both of them the first time in the Candidates. Esipenko 23 years old and Sindarov just 20 years old, and he is playing with, well, there's a lot of momentum behind him. He's just on fantastic form. Even quite recently in the Tata Steel Masters, he came second, had an excellent tournament. So, anyway, let's take a look at these two young, exciting players in their round one game. Many commentators have picked Javokhir Sindarov as a dark horse to win the Candidates, and that's certainly based on his form in 2025 and even early 2026. Esipenko, well, no one's really tipped him. Well, let's see what happened. So it's a solid Queen's Gambit declined from the Russian, playing under the FIDE flag, I should mention. An exchange on d5 from Sindarov and bishop f4. So this is an indication that, well, this is going to be a tense fight. If White wants to kind of keep matters very much under control, play for a slight advantage, then you play bishop g5. But this way, you can see that Sindarov doesn't want an exchange of bishops. That's the basic idea behind this line. c5. So with no bishop on g5, then black is able to strike out at the center and put pressure on d4. So standard development from both players. And this is already a big decision for black. You have to decide, do you want to exchange on d4? Do you want to push? Or do you want to just leave the tension there and keep the pawns as they are? Well, Esipenko makes a very committal decision and pushes that pawn. So now that means that White has more control in the middle with that nice pawn chain. There's no pressure on d4. But black now has an overlap of pawns on the queen side, which could be significant, you know, if black manages to drive forward. So that leaves the game very double-edged. And knight h5, very, again, an uncompromising follow-up. I think a good follow-up. That bishop is a strong piece. You want to try and exchange it off. So bishop e5. So Sindarov wants to provoke a weakness on the king side. And this position has been reached before, and knight g5 would lead to crazy complications, but I'm assuming that because of the speed Esipenko was playing, he had that one under control. But bishop g3, Sindarov played fairly quickly. So f5. So perhaps looking to strike later with f4. But for the moment, just blunting the bishop on c2. And it means that White can't break through with e4. That's very important. But it does give away the e5 square. But how can White use that? That's the question. You know, that bishop is always under control. So it's sort of difficult to move that knight on f3 now. Somehow White's pieces are a bit static. So b3. Of course, White would very much like to break down that spearhead, and that would enable White to get pressure on d5. But no, Esipenko isn't obliging and plays queen a5 to attack the knight, which is pushed away, and then b5. That's the point. He wanted to get his support the pawn on c4 and get his pawn majority working on the queen side. Knight f4, committal decision from Sindarov. An exchange. I suppose he's reinforcing the protection of that bishop on e5, but as I said before, it's kind of static. It's not going anywhere. And you know, white would somehow love to get these pieces working, but it's very hard to do that while the bishop on e5 is kind of a stopper in the middle of the board. Queen d8. The queen comes back, job done on the queen side, and comes back to d7, a very stable square, maintaining protection of these points. Also clears the queen out of the way because he might want to, at some moment, get the a-pawn into play as well. Rook e3, rook e8. So Esipenko is making sure that this bishop has enough protection in case, you know, white suddenly piles over on the e-file. h4. Well, that knight might land on g5, so therefore h6. And I mean, this is just a very balanced position. Queen b1 or rook b1 are both computer approved, and the idea is to kind of hold up black's majority on the queen side. But Sindarov played g3, so that just kind of holds this pawn. But this is dubious. Let's see why. So a6, that just sort of holds the queen side for a moment. Bishop f7, excellent maneuver from Esipenko. The bishop is going to come to h5. And you can see that these bishops are just slicing through white's position. And that's a very awkward pin to deal with. And yeah, this bishop is certainly going nowhere. But you never know when black might be able to exchange that piece off. e4, so Sindarov feels the need to try and break open the queen side. He wants to get this rook into play. He somehow needs something else in the position. Bishop a5, so this bishop could be coming around here to b6 to put pressure on that isolated pawn. An exchange. Now bishop d1, so clearly Sindarov wants to support that knight and maybe bring the queen over. Now, I think we need a think and drink moment. I've got my tea ready, so I'm going to have a drink. You have a think. How do you play if you were black in this position? Black to play. I'll see you in a moment after this message. Do you want to improve your chess? Get access to live masterclasses with yours truly? Then subscribe to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess, and for just $25 a month, you get a newsletter with a test game, calculation puzzles, a monthly opening survey, access to an archive with over 100 opening surveys. And you can join in live masterclasses exclusive to patrons where you can ask me questions directly over Zoom. All for only $25 per month. Do subscribe to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess and join the club. This is a very tense moment in the game. You know, there haven't been many exchanges. You know, there's a lot of tension on the queen side and in the middle of the board. At this moment, Esipenko exchanged on f3. And I think that's a total misjudgment of the position. Would have been far better to keep the tension there. Instead, for example, rook a8 I think is a good move. So those rooks are connected. These rooks are not connected. Yes, split rooks, that's a problem. And after this, for example, white can't attack on the king side. As I said before, this bishop is kind of a stopper. Looks very nice, but actually it just breaks the flow of white's pieces. And then, you know, there could be an exchange of rooks here. Black might be able to get control of the a-file. This queenside majority could be potent. You know, we never know when this pawn is going to advance. I think black has a clear advantage. But this was an error. Now, black is still in the game here. And one option would be to play the bishop down here and cement it in with c3. Although, you know, in this position, well, this is quite unclear actually. White certainly has decent compensation in this case, because this bishop could get into the game, and White's pawns, eventually aren't great, and the king is a little bit exposed. White has compensation. But after this, I start to favour White, because that rook is doing a great job flying down the A file. I mean, maybe Esipenko just thought, well, I can grab this pawn, somehow it's going to work out. But actually, this is really dangerous now. So this bishop is under fire. Now, and watch out for, White's rook swinging over in combination with the queen. Maybe even taking on h6 and then a queen g6 check. So rook takes bishop. Okay, that bishop started to look very dangerous. If pawn takes, then queen e6 blockades, and black is actually doing quite well there. But Sindarov played rook takes. I should say we're getting into time pressure now. They were down to like 2 or 3 minutes each. I think the game has swung in White's favour. The computer still thinks that black is all right here, but I think, for example, after this, well, White's major pieces are so active that I think it's just very difficult for black to handle. But instead of bishop c7, Esipenko played queen c6, and after this, his position is collapsing. Now, if d takes c4, bishop f3, this bishop gets into the game, and that's very powerful. In the game, b takes was played, but again the bishop comes into the game with tremendous effect. If, for example, queen d6, then rook e8, very simple. Well, we exchange that one off, rook number 2 comes in, and the king is in desperate trouble. And that's roughly what happened here. Queen c5 played in the game, queen g6, so threatening the bishop. The rook might come to e7 at some point. Okay, you've got to watch out for the queen, but you can see that could be an issue. So bishop a7, rook e8, exchanging this one off. A check. Now this was a little bit of repetition just to get to the time control. Bishop d7. So this bishop is entering the game. Black is the exchange down, and the attack is just way too strong. So yeah, here is where we had the repetition. And after rook e6, this was move 41. So they reached the time control at move 40. Remember, it's 40 moves in 2 hours. So this is move 41. So no longer any time pressure. And here, Esipenko resigned. That's a very clean finish. Of course, rook e8 is threatened, and if this is taken, then the king doesn't escape. So this would lead to checkmate. Yeah, I mean, the white squares are just way too weak on the king side. So Sindarov starts with a win in round 1. Fantastic result for him. And, well, I think we can see how strong his nerves are. We saw that in the FIDE World Cup in the autumn. That, he didn't always have a fantastic position, but he's not afraid to keep the tension and put pressure on his opponent. And that's what happened here. Wasn't the greatest position, but Esipenko finally cracked and misjudged the situation and took on f3. Too greedy, going for the pawn on d4. So there we go. Javokhir Sindarov with one win in the first round. I am going to look at least one other game from this first round. I'm still waiting for 2 games to finish. So anyway, bear with me, and there'll be at least one more video coming soon.